All right, so had to switch over my audio. Hopefully everybody can hear me again tonight. Apologies for that. All right, perfect. So let's get started again. Take two. I'm still getting used to streaming, so my apologies. So here we go. Tonight's session is about the designer tools and what others would call modding, but really a user interface for creating content, modifying content, creating your own components, vessels, maps, missions, whatever the case may be. And we're going to kind of cover at a high level all that the designer has to offer today. There are some parts that are still kind of in progress, but we'll cover that as we go. What I would also say is don't expect tonight to be an in-depth dive on every single field and capability throughout the entire designer. In the future, we'll go into deep dives on individual things like how to work with a component and fine-tune it, how to work with a vessel, so on and so forth, and tips and tricks for each one. So we'll try to do individual sessions for those and go from there. So tonight is really the overview, so let's get going. Here we've got Horizons running in the background here. I've got our station selection, and this is the standard one that you would see. Hiding down here in the bottom right corner is Designer. If none of you have clicked on that or had the desire to do any modding or anything, this is an in-progress tool. So the first time you open it, it's actually going to tell you that this is, in development. It's still being worked on. There's plenty of bugs, and that's going to be true even while we demo it tonight. But the idea was to get this out to the community so they can start doing their own missions and mods, and we've got a lot of people already working through it. But let's dive in. So the way Horizons is built and what the designer here shows is it's modular, literally. So the Horizons world, its missions, everything when you play are in its own module, in this case called Horizons. So it's a module just like everything else. You also automatically get one called Custom. This one is for, not for the modding community, but for somebody that might want to have a setup and have, say, DMX lights that trigger on alert status, or when explosions happen or when the shields get hit, things like that. We're going to actually dive into some of those examples. But this one's available to anybody to use for those kinds of customizations. But as you can see, I've also got Horizons Research and Development, which is my personal module that I use locally for adding and testing and playing with missions that are in progress. And once they're ready, I move them over to the Horizons module. And then I have one here for the Space Camp Alumni Association that we did for virtual missions. And we'll dive a little bit into some of the customizations and things there, just to give you some examples. So notice, however, I've got Horizons, and that one is on by default. You can't turn off your core module, in this case Horizons. The custom one is currently enabled, but I've got Horizons R&D and Space Camp turned off. But I want to show you how this architecture works. Each module is its own folder, so everything is self-contained. Nothing is overlapping. You don't have to replace files to add modules to the game. You simply add to your own folder. So each of these is their own individual folder in the Horizons install. That way, if I turn a module on or off, it doesn't cause any issues with other modules, be it the primary module or any subsequent one. So if I click back over here, here's the list right here as it stands that you would see without any module additions. But you notice I refreshed it. Let's go back here. I'm going to turn on R&D. Oh, helps if I click right. I'm going to turn on R&D and I'm going to turn on Space Camp, and then we'll refresh this and see what happens here. I have a bigger list. Why? Because those modules each individually added additional content. So now my station selection screen has other things I'm working on, such as input testing, but also there's an entire section here called Space Camp, which was for the virtual missions. So these are special screens that are similar to the classic roles of flight, tactical sciences, etc., but they are ultimately different. What this is really communicating to you as the potential modder is you can create your own screens. You can create your own content, not just that's in the 3D world, but literally what players interact with on screen, whether it be a touch screen, a tablet, a phone, a monitor, whatever. And that's just to show you it's as simple as with the designer, I'm turning modules on and off as I go. So I'm going to turn these back off temporarily. And again, watch this. I'll just come back over here, refresh, and boom. I've turned off those modules, so that content is no longer available. Just like that. I don't have to restart Horizons. I don't have to go in and out. It's all automatic, which is great. So the designer here, we're going to pick on Horizons first, but we're going to end up in each of these modules in different phases, just talking about different things. So let's dive into the big boy. Okay. So here we are in the Horizons module, and some of your obvious stuff. Name, description, priority, which I'll cover in a minute, and version. So for those of you, that are doing your own mods, as you get deeper and deeper into your modding process and you're distributing that mod, which again is just your own personal folder that you can then zip up and send to folks. With that in mind, all they have to do is replace that folder. They don't have to, again, mess with any Horizons content. The versioning is exactly what you think it is, though. So I can send out version 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. It's just for the author of the mod to keep track, right? And speaking of which, a full credit system is built in so that you can give credit for, hey, such and such did the music, like Joel, who did our amazing music for Horizons, or such and such did missions, or somebody helped with artwork. Whatever it is, you can give full credit here, just like movie credits. That way, if you've got a team that's working on a module together, you can make sure everybody's properly credited. So priority. That is literally the priority order in which module content is loaded. So let's walk through that. Horizons will always be module priority number 1. That means it's literally the first thing loaded. That's important because as subsequent modules are loaded that are ranked lower, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, loaded in that order, that means content that I have, say, created in a new module where I have replaced a vessel or updated a dialogue tree, where I've done some replacement. Okay, that's sitting in this other module. It will overwrite what is in Horizons in memory only. It will not damage in any way the original content. So if I were to turn a module off that did some replacements, it simply is no longer there, which makes everything nice and clean, which is what I talked about. So what this is also important, as the community modules grow, people adding content that are sharing back and forth, this means you can have a module that's large in scale. Maybe it adds an entire fleet of ships, a whole slew of missions. But then someone comes along and wants to create a module for that module. So I might have a module ranked 10 that I've put in there, priority 10. But then somebody else can create one priority 11. Again, lower number, so it loads after. And you create a natural hierarchy. It's a real simple system, but it allows for a lot of flexibility down the road for people to, again, add content on top of one another. And we'll go through some more of those details I'm describing with the replacement as we go. But here we now get into the fun stuff, the actual things in the world and in the universe that you actually work with. And we're going to just go right down the list here. Commodities. These are most commonly things you find on vessels, on stations, in containers. This is the stuff that's in the world that you can find. Now, this is not ordnance. So if the regular players will know, you can find, say, missiles and things like that in some containers. Those are items as well, but we'll get to that later. This is just pure commodities, meaning that other than their existence in the world, they can be traded and bought and sold, but they don't do anything mechanically in the universe, with one exception. I'm going to click on, let's pick on lithium here. So here's a good example of the detail you can get into just with the designer right here. Again, I don't have to modify any files. I don't have to know anything. I can just work with the editor just like this. A brief description, which is just a one-sentence description there. And hey, look, it even does spell check. And then details. Wow. It's amazing what spell check does these days. By the way, developer, not an English major. That's funny. So with this here, the details is literally maybe a paragraph's worth of information just to inform the players what this really is, right? But then you can actually set things like its state. Is it a solid? Is it a liquid? So on and so forth, the type of container. The icons used, as you can see on the other screen there. But here's the only thing I wanted to point out here. The rarity is its random generation rarity. So 0 means it's very rare. 1 means it's very common. Volatility, though, is the fun one. If it's got a volatility level nearing 1, it's very volatile. That means at the end of the day, if the ship takes damage and this object potentially takes damage, it could explode. So you might have volatile, you might have a commodity that's fuel based, right? So it might be a volatile fuel or a nuclear device or something like that that could actually take damage. So the idea here is cargo can actually cause damage when it's damaged. So that's an important distinction. So commodity editor, I can add a new commodity right from here, and I can, of course, you saw me drill in, and I can edit right from here. And commodities will, as Horizons grows, and this was touched on in the roadmap, not in detail, as the economy is introduced into the world of the open play, you'll actually be able to buy and sell at stations for credits. Actually an open world model. Let's keep on going. Companies. Oh wait, I'm sorry, syntax. Let's see. Can we modify things in the Horizons module? No, sir. Excellent question. So the Horizons module is hands-off. It's kind of a read-only module because that's the one I created, right? It's the one that's for the community at large. So the whole point of having your own module is so that you can modify Horizons content, but through your own module. You do not directly modify any Horizons content. You're kind of getting a peek behind the curtain here because this is what I use to create and modify the content now, this designer. So great question, though, syntax. Thank you for that. So companies are, again, thinking in a world space, are exactly that. They are companies, manufacturers, etc. And so, if you think of some famous companies in, science fiction, you can imagine that. So when you're creating your own world or your own modules where you want to have companies out there that, build ships, like Newport Construction Industries, build several of the ships that are in the module Horizons. It's just about fleshing out the world at large. Components, big part of how vessels work. Components are what drive the entire logic of how a vessel even functions, right? How it gets its power, how it's able to maneuver, how it's able to turn, how fast can it go, can it do FTL, so on and so forth. The types of components that you can define in Horizons are things like cloaking devices, environment, which is your life support, FTL drive, faster than light travel, maneuvering, as in, thrusters, power modules, generating power, propulsion, as in going fast somewhere in one direction, your sensor model, so being able to power sensors, shield generation, an individual weapon, and that's a distinction between weapons, that and weapon systems. Weapon systems is your power management for your weapons at large. So it's how you can pull power to and from your weapons as a pool versus an individual weapon, which we'll get to here in a second. So you could actually filter by that, but we'll just kind of peek around, and I'll pick on the APG here. So again, your type, what function does it have? It stores energy. If it has a company, manufacturer, just like that, model. Now, this is the literal game model, the 3D asset that is tied to this for rendering on screen. And we'll actually get to models later, too. Hardpoints is when you have a hardpoint on a vessel, it can handle X amount of, each individual hardpoint on a vessel's design can handle components of a certain size. So a good example is you might have a component hard slot on your vessel that can only handle one hardpoint. This is one hardpoint, that would be okay. But maybe it's also one that can handle up to 10. So you might have a very large component that is a hardpoint size of 10. So that means it could only fit on a vessel that would facilitate and have that much room in a particular hardpoint. A great example is you would not put the engine room of the Horizons in a fighter. It's not going to fit, right? So you have much larger components in scale, so the hardpoints help derive what can fit where. So you might find this awesome component out in space, but it may not fit on the vessel you have. Tough luck sometimes. Statistics for it, and I am going a little more detail than I expected, but that's okay. So, the individual components, its integrity, its optimal levels, its bleed rates, things like that. Sounds, which are the literal sounds in games that it makes during these different things. Its ambient level, startup, so on and so forth. And then if it's a weapon, so this component happens to be a weapon, what type of weapon is it? Is it a projectile? Is it a beam? Is it a missile? Its recycle time, so on and so forth. as well as the projectile model and damage. Now, the damage types, I will touch on this just from a gameplay mechanic standpoint. These are fairly recent, within the last 4 months of the releases we've been doing for Horizons. These are all the different types of damage, and they all are genuinely or modeled differently on how they affect the ship. Acidic, concussive, biological, etc. I won't tip the hat to how all of them work right now, but it gives you some depth of what you can do there. So that's just, again, components at an overview. Dialogues. So this is literally the dialogue engine that's in Horizons. And it, like modules, has its own inheritance system. And I'll cover what that really means. So if I click on generic here, this is the generic dialogue. This is like the bare bones one that any NPC in the universe, or player for that matter, would use, right? If you didn't assign anything else. I can scroll through here and see literally everything, and I'll actually pick on this one here. And app players will notice an individual dialogue can have text. Now, this is text that would go back to in response to something, and I'll show you an example of that here in a second. But the topics are literally the topics that the player or an NPC would have presented to them to then send back to whoever they're conversing with. Perfect example, and if you've played Horizons, you've seen these. Unknown craft, identify yourself. What is your status? What is your cargo manifest? These are conditionally available as topics based on the ship-to-ship communications. But I can edit this right from here and actually create my own dialogue trees. And you can actually have dialogue link back and forth to create nested dialogue trees, which again, we'll go into far more detail on another video in terms of how you can work with that. But like that's the dialogue group. And then I'll come back here. And then you can also do, oh, and actually I'll show this. Let me close this one here. So I have generic, and then I have generic comm station. Well, why is that important? Over here, this inherits generic. So what that means is I've defined some special ones here. Okay, so this talks differently. Automated request, faction craft, assistance required, hostiles present, right? So that is what a comm station would send out as a distress call for the distress message, right? But notice I've only got, 15 or so topics defined here. Where's all the others that I would use? Well, they're all in that generic dialogue right there because I'm inheriting from that. I don't have to redefine everything else. I only need to define what I'm changing, which makes it really easy to create, a lot of explicit dialogues for your NPCs without having to reinvent the wheel every single time and create entirely new trees. And it also supports multilingual, by the way. Like this is the system menus and everything right in here, like the actual titles for all the in-game GUIs that you see bouncing around. And you can actually specify different languages. Right now, Italian, French, German, and Spanish, to actually then define those dialogues. So you could actually have completely localized dialogue for each language that's in the game. Now, that will be the list will grow in terms of what languages are supported over time, and then of course these will be growing as well, so that we'll be supporting localization for those languages over time. Okay, we'll press on. Encounters. I've covered this in a couple different ways before, but encounters are literally like a Dungeons and Dragons random NPC encounter chart. So, for example, here, alliance encounters. So, right now it's alliance encounters, faction, location empty, but the chance is out of 1. So it's really a percentile. So that's really 15% chance. So when the game, when you go to a new area, it's going to roll a 100-sided die in the traditional sense. And if it rolls 15 or under, you'll trigger an encounter. With that in mind, it'll then pick randomly from the groups here. I've got defined commercial traffic that could be an ANAV and could be a colonial movers, etc. So you can define details, and you can even specify actions that are in the event system, which we'll get to a little bit later as well. Let's see. Hemicus, will encounters be coming in the next Horizons update? Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's already done. So the next update that's imminent, today, here we are near the middle of the week, in mid-November. I'll be putting that update out this week. So release 20, which is what that will be, will have this encounter tree. So great question, Hemocast. Thank you. And then the last thing I'll touch on here is the encounters. You notice I have multiple ones. You can have encounters that are specific to areas. So you can base it on the faction influence. So in an area that's controlled by the Alliance, you might have certain encounters, whereas in an area controlled by the Dashi, you might have others. And then in an open world, you can have, again, a third set of encounters, allowing for a lot of variation. Again, kind of going back to that old, tabletop RPG style of encounter charts. It's really, at its roots, that's exactly what it is. But it allows, especially if you're doing your game mastering with players and you're running one ship or multiple ships through your own adventure, it allows you to not only let the random encounters happen, but you can force random encounters along the way too, which is nice. Okay, now events I'm not going to touch on here. I'm going to intentionally touch on events when we step over to one of the other modules to show you some examples there. So we'll circle back to events here a little bit later. Factions is exactly that. Let's see here. What'd I break? Okay, we'll have to hit. I broke something. So factions are, the list just isn't showing up, so yeah, yay. Factions are exactly that. The Alliance, Dashi, Vinkari, etc. And in those individual factions, you're defining what they are, what they look like, and you're also defining how they interact with each other. Meaning, are they hostile? Are they allies? Are they neutral? So you can create essentially the political stance between each faction is available there. Now, maps is in progress. So this one is under development, but this is exactly what it sounds like. So a game map can be of any size and 3 dimensions. And then you can predefine a number of systems you want it to randomly generate. But you can also have a mix. You can say, I want it to have 1,000 star systems, but at the same time, I want to define like 100 of them on my own. So you can mix and match. So if you define 100 of them on your own, it'll generate 900 to equal that 1,000 number for you. Being able to do that. So in a future video, I'll be diving into maps once that part is done. This is one of the few areas of the designer that is not functional today. It's still under development. Models. Literally the 3D models that are in Horizons. In a separate video, I'll actually show you step by step how to import your own modules into Horizons. It's actually a few simple steps using a couple of open source tools. But Horizons uses FBX models, the XBX model format, excuse me, specifically for its model type, and those are imported and available. So what you're doing here is this is referencing that model, but then also what do you want to do with it? Let's actually let's go pick on the Hyperion class here. So name, that's just your in-game name. The source is the model name that you have stored in the model folder of your module. But then you can apply different built-in shaders. Excuse me. Blue is literally just an all blue shader, usually used on my part for debugging. The Hydra shader is the standard one. Ignore light means it's an object that is not affected by shadow. So if you have kind of an ethereal object that you want in the world that might apply to that, you can do that. The particle shader is for the particle system. It also utilizes some assumptions on world light and how it blends alpha-wise. We have a specific planet shader that's used for planet rendering. And then the running lights on ships, the blinking lights, have their own shader as well. This list will grow over time. I won't get into details on what that is, but you'll have some other shaders available to you in the future. And then depending on how many meshes the model has available to it, you will actually then be able to specify per mesh what texture it's using. For example, here I have it set to Hyperion. So that's just important that, especially if you're reusing certain textures over and over again on different ships, different vessels, or different objects, you can reuse that texture without defining it in the model. But then you can also specify here. So if you had a lot of different textures, the engine allows you to be that complex. You can have some really in-depth meshes that have 15 textures on it if you really wanted to get crazy. You have that ability to have that there. Okay. Ordnance. So ordnance is a special type. It is the ammunition, if you will, for objects in the game that are typically weapons, because they have their own types. So we'll pick on the Devastator here, just to show you the editor here. You also pick, you'll see anything that can be a 3D object in the world will always have the ability to select its 3D model. But Ordnance can have its own turn speed, acceleration, etc. And then here's the damage type again that we saw on the other side. Now, Ordnance is a special case because it can be treated like a commodity. As if you've played Horizons, you may have found some missiles kind of hiding in, well, both as stock on other ships, but also in containers and such. So ordnance can be treated like commodities when it comes to cargo that you might find on a vessel. Screens. So, and you'll see it right here, and you'll notice some familiar names. This is literally a definition of every screen that is accessible in Horizons. For example, here's flight. So, flight control, including helm and navigation. What group it belongs in. Its base HTML file. So the base HTML file, and I will cover this one in detail for folks. That's in the case of Horizons, that's the file that contains all of the common assets. The header, all the links to your style sheets and JavaScript files. It has everything already kind of pre-baked, including communication with the game engine, everything ready to go. And then you specify your source file that then has all the details for that screen. Why that's important is, again, 90% of the work is actually in the screen here in terms of the plumbing to get something to work, whereas the source is your changes for that user experience. And some screens will be complex, others will be extremely simple. The alert status screen, for example, that you can see in game is literally 5 lines of JavaScript that's contained in the source file, because everything else is already running perfectly in the base. And most people that add their own screens will probably not use anything other than console.htm. The reason that field's available to you is really detailed modders can create their own base file with their own links and content that may be above and beyond what I've done and give you that flexibility. You'll see as I go through the designer, and you may have already seen it, I try very hard to provide as much flexibility to the modder as possible so that I, as the game engine developer and the game engine itself, is not making assumptions on what you want. And go from there. And then you'll see they're all categorized. Now notice, here's all the ones in the main group, in progress, and then the admin screens. If we click over here, they're grouped just by that automatically. So based on what group you put in here. So that's screens. So vessels we'll cover briefly today. There's 3 areas that are still in development with the designer. We already mentioned maps. This is the second one. We are going to click into it just to show you the level of detail you're going to have. So vessels are your vessel classes, like the Horizons, so on and so forth. So we'll pick on the Horizons here and drill into that. So it is functional to a part, but it is not complete. We're still working through a lot. Again, you can pick the company. Is it playable? Is it spawnable? Again, rarity, some basics there. Model information, NPC information, including is it sentient? But these are all the areas, and none of these are complete. Setting up what damage control teams are available on the ship. Cameras. Now, that's literally the player cameras, so they can see out of the front of the ship, left, right, back. So every vessel can have its own camera definitions for how it looks in the world. And I don't mean how the model looks, I mean how it looks out into the world. So you, the player, if you're on that vessel, will have a different set of cameras based on what vessel you're flying. It may be a similar list, but they'll all be a little different because every vessel will have a different style. So, and the cameras will be in different places as a result. Again, cargo, we mentioned it before. This is the cargo that's on the vessel as a stock model. So this wouldn't be cargo that you would have special, say, for a individual mission. We'll talk about that in a little bit. This is going to be cargo that's like if you bought, such and such vessel right off the lot and drove it off the lot. What comes in there as base cargo? Decks is literally a definition of every deck on the vessel. The Horizons, has many decks, but a fighter doesn't really have deck. It just has the cockpit, right? So you can define those here. Some vessels have docking capability, so you can actually define the docks it has. Now, docks can be docking bays, docking ports, and there are differences in how that works in the world. The docking ports, where a shuttle can dock to a docking port, but maybe the bay that a ship has is too small for something to dock. So it understands those variables. Effects are primarily the engine effects you might see when you're moving. So like, the engine exhaust, things like that. But it could be other things like exhaust fumes coming out of a sensor tower or whatever. However, the particle system is really what this is driving. Hard points. And I'm just talking through these real quick because none of the editors here are done. But hard points are what I mentioned before. So hard points are the definition on every vessel class of two things. One, how many slots do I have that I can fill on this ship? Where are they physically on the ship? Like, where is their physical location in space? Are they internal? Are they external? And again, we mentioned sizes before when we were talking about components. So like how large of a hard point is this, or how small? But also hardpoints can be explicit. So a certain hardpoint can say this is for power, meaning the only kind of component I can put in that slot is a power component. Or this slot is for sensors, so I can only put a sensor. And then other slots may be open. As long as that component fits in that slot, you can put it in there. So it allows for flexibility for players to be able to kind of mod their ship in certain ways, but you can be rigid when you need to be in your designs. Lights are the running lights on a ship. On the Horizons, on the docking bays, and on Space Dock, you'll see the the red and green lighting. You can define all of that here, and you'll be able to define that on every single vessel. Objects are what objects come, again, stock on this vessel class. A perfect example is the Horizons in any particular mission that's out there today. You have a set number of shuttles and a set number of repair drones. Those are objects that come on the Horizons class vessels. So as a result, those would be listed here. Stock ordnance, meaning what's available to that vessel at the time. Now, roles is similar to screens, but it's more literal. So you can define on a particular vessel what roles are there to fill, to pilot and maneuver and operate this vessel. Most vessels in the Starship Horizons universe will have the classic 6 roles: captain, flight, tactical sciences, communications, and engineering. No worries, I'm being late. Welcome to the fun. So anyway, so the roles are the traditional ones, but a prime example is a fighter, like the Jackal fighter, may only has a pilot, right? So you can say this vessel has a pilot role. This will become more important as some other changes are coming to how you interact with the stations. It'll actually be more explicit. So, and I'll provide an example. So you'll start by picking roles rather than screens here in the near future. So you can say, I'm picking the flight role. Well, why is that important? As people mod Horizons and as I add content, the flight console for an Alliance vessel may be different from the Dashi console for flight. Meaning they serve the same purpose, but they may have a different look and feel. If you think, in Star Trek terms, Federation versus Klingon, right? Both have a flight console or a navigation console, but they look completely different. The idea being, if I'm the flight officer and I've picked the flight role, and I'm on the Alliance flight screen, but then we jump over from an Alliance craft and we go into a Dashi craft, then maybe the screen changes to the Dashi version automatically for you. Those are the kinds of things we're working through for, again, that immersion capability. So that's rules. Okay, weapon groups is literally being able to group weapons by category, by type, by location, forward, aft, port, starboard, what have you, and being able to have that definition so that you can then have the ability, should you choose, based on the design of the vessel, to be able to allow the tactical officer to fire explicitly just port, just starboard, just aft, so on and so forth. The Horizons today just has like one standard, on-off for the base lasers. But don't be surprised if that changes in the future. Using weapon groups, you can do things like that with your own craft. Now, the GUI is literally GUI elements on the three-dimensional screen. And a simple example is when you are in fighter mode in Horizons in a mission in fighter mode, you'll get the targeting reticle in the middle there of the screen. That's defined on that vessel class here, again, just in the XML through the designer. So that's not hard-coded. So you can actually add GUI components to the 3D view to support that. And there'll be some other things coming in the future for that, to be able to have different little components like distance to target, weapon ordnance lists, things like that. And you'll be able to define where they go on screen and how, where they are relationally to other things all through here. Today, this already works for just stock images and stock UI like I was mentioning, but we'll be expanding that in the future too. Okay. Back to the module. So we just went through vessels. Obviously vessels is a big one, and that's one of the again, there's 3 left. That's one of the big ones still coming. So names. This entire area is devoted to random name generation. So for NPCs or sentient characters, you actually can have a list. We have to pre-generate characters, male, female, and then surnames. Okay, but then you can also create naming groups, which could be for a particular vessel class, like, in other words, these are, and I'm just throwing it out there, but you can also do it by faction. So you could pick a particular faction to say, okay, these are Dashi names, these are Alliance names, these are Vinkari names. So you can actually have different lists filtered within here for all of these items, by the way, not just for the NPC names. But like, for example, here's that. And then systems is the star system names. So you can actually, this is where you can actually randomly generate, if you're having the system create random names, it can do that here. But you can also define suffixes like alpha, beta, borealis, epsilon. So it'll actually intelligently determine, okay, do I need to have a second name or not? And then it'll pick from this list. So you can create some really robust system names that way. But also with that. And lastly, vessels. So you can actually have a list of vessel names, and that can also be 2 things. I mentioned groups. Groups could be a vessel class. So you might want all of the carriers for the Alliance faction to have a subset of names for consistency, whereas, say, destroyers have a subset of names, just like the Navy has certain naming conventions for that, how they handle ships. You can do the same here. So right now, the list is pretty much wide open. In terms of what I'm supplying, but depending on your level of desire for your universe and what you define in Horizons, you can get that fine-tuned and nuanced. Okay, campaigns. This is the last one I'm working on. So the campaign module editor is, and I mentioned this kind of on our last one, but the campaign system is a way of creating a hierarchical tree of mission progression. So in other words, we're going to talk about missions here in a second. But if I have mission 1 and they go through mission 1, and that's the beginning of my campaign, but at the end, maybe they win, but they don't, like maybe they get 80% of it right. Like they don't get everything. They get it done, but not quite. You can say, okay, well, they finished with a perfect score, send them now to mission 2. Oh, they finished with a not so perfect score, send them to mission 3. Oh, they lost. Well, they didn't die, but they screwed up and they didn't finish the mission. Send them to mission 4. So it can intelligently pick based on circumstances, and we're going to talk about this in the event system, conditions on where to go next. So this is even possible to send them on a wild goose chase where they can thread them through a series of missions, but say they keep screwing up. You can force them to try to go back through a previous mission to get it right. So you'll have that level of flexibility. Campaigns also, from a player perspective, can be saved. So you can save your progress and come back later. So, it goes back to the D&D thing, right? Everybody gets together every week and plays and goes through the progress. The first campaigns you'll see are going to be small ones, both for training and just some short pick-and-play campaigns. But this architecture and this engine is designed for the big dog, the big mission, the campaign system I always talk about, which is the really long many hours campaign that will be the last thing we kind of build for Horizons. And by the way, if anybody that's watching has questions, please feel free to chime in. Happy to have questions as we go through it. I just talk a lot. So, all right. I'm going to skip campaigns or skip missions because we're going to go into detail on that in just a second. But I'm going to hop down to Encyclopedia because this is an easy one to hit. So Encyclopedia, or we call it the Pedia system in Horizons. This is literally Wikipedia-style articles that you can create and manage through the editor here for your module or for the world. So I've just got a few examples I just threw in here for tonight. None of these are complete or what I would consider final by any stretch. But they support full markup language so that when a player pulls up an article in their console, it'll just be like they're browsing Wikipedia. I'll pick on James Nolan here in the PD entry for that. Born in 2201, James Nolan was raised in a military family. Of course, I've got some formatting here. I can write and left align and do all that kind of stuff. All your typical formatting and markup language. I can even embed images or videos, media, etc. None of this is revolutionary, but it's built into the engine. So your articles can be more than just basic text. They can be really robust content. And articles, just like Wikipedia, articles can link to other articles. You'll just do that by doing double brackets with the article name. So if I wanted to go to, say, Alliance, if I could spell it right, I would do that and save it. And then that would be a link to the Alliance entry in the Pedia system. Now, if you create a module that is a child of Horizons and you've created new Pedia entries for some of your missions, what's really great is those just get added on top of the pile of any Pedia entries that already ship with Horizons. So it just adds to the world. Can mission results, and I'm picking back up on a question here. Can mission results affect the next mission? So if X is not killed in mission A, then he appears in mission B. Absolutely. I will touch on that. And keep me honest, Dwayne. I get bad about this sometimes. When we get to the event system, keep me honest. I will kind of walk through an example of that. But the event system can absolutely say, based on A, B, or C, do this. So you'll use for things like that. Campaigns have campaign variables, which you can set. And these variables are consistent across all missions in a campaign. So I'm talking about the campaigns again. So if you say, okay, mission A, they did this, but such and such survived. So flip this variable to, such and such survived. Like, did Dashi A survive? Yes. So when mission 2 hits, it can say, is Dashi 2 survive? Yes. Oh, then spawn them here. Did they survive? No. Then don't bother with them. So you can actually bring back NPCs, respawn them, and do other things conditionally based on things like that. And again, I'll go into a little more detail when we get to the event system. So, and when we say scripted in Horizons, by the way, most of the scripting most modders will do is going to be through the event system. We do support full C# scripting, which I'm about to touch on. But you will find, even for myself, designing the missions that have already been out there and the ones that I'm working on, 99% of the time, I'm not doing the low-level C# scripting. I'm doing the event architecture for things like you just pointed out. So let's take a moment. Let's go ahead and dive into missions, because this is a big item here. And then we'll be hitting a few other modules just to show you some examples. And the event system will probably be the last thing we hit on. But let's dive in. So I'm in the Horizons module, and here we have a list of some of the modules available. Some of these you might notice you don't see when you play. That's because they're hidden. They're turned off. That's by design. So we'll actually pick on Radical Action here. So we're now editing the Radical Action mission with common content, starting map, etc. Marquee, where you actually can you can upload. You can click to upload a new image to be able to put your own image in there, which is great. If you have a prologue with any text, you can put that in here. Epilogue, which the epilogue system hasn't been fully implemented yet, but it'll allow you to, if you're doing a mission-based, like strictly mission, you're not doing a campaign, you're not staying in world, where you can do an epilogue of sorts if you wanted to do any kind of wrap up of any story for that mission. But that would be on a single mission, loop, playing an individual mission, not in a campaign or an open world scenario. Players, literally, this is defining the players that are allowed in this mission and what they're flying. There's no technical limit. Most of the missions I've defined have 4. We're planning to fully support 6 to 8. 6 for sure. 8 I'm expecting to support, but I'll only make that official once I'm comfortable with how the performance and everything is. But I do expect, certainly 6 is supported, so that's 36 total players if you have all 6 positions filled across all 6 ships. And then, of course, if we have 8, that's more. But this is where you would define the individual ships, if the faction applies, etc. And there. But you'll notice they have a startup point, S1 through 4. That's your spawn points. So here, you define where players or NPCs can spawn in the world for this mission. Again, we're at the mission level now, so we're not at the world or at the module. This is all the data we're looking at here is specific to this mission. So in this case, the S1 is in the Solar System Earth, docked at Space Dock in Space Dock's main docking bay. Whereas these others are just floating out in space, as you can see. And they're in cruise mode for those spawn points. Objectives are literally, what does the player have to do to complete this mission? Or what do they have to keep, what ships do they have to keep alive from dying to not fail the mission? So on and so forth. I'll just pick Rich Celiano 1. Primary objectives, if it's a rank primary, it has to be a success in order for them to win. If it's a secondary or an opportunity rank, then if they fail it, it doesn't fail the mission. It's just potentially score them less points, or you can, again, take action in the campaign mode or whatever to then change the outcome down the road. So maybe they completed all primaries but didn't complete a particular secondary. Maybe they didn't protect a particular comm station, but they handled all the others just fine. So then you can redirect them down a different path and go from there. All right, let's see. Does it make a difference if the ship is, say, a single fighter versus full cruise ship? So would you support, say, 18 players if 6 are on one ship and 12 on their own ships? Or have you not tested this? It's a great question. 6 fighters is a lot smaller footprint. That's easier, obviously. So that's a great question. I would say it's absolutely fair with my 36 model that I just mentioned to say that, could you have 36 fighters in place of 6 vessels with 6 players each? Yeah, I think have I personally built a mission to do that? No, but mechanically, there's nothing stopping that from occurring. Meaning I don't have any hard caps in Horizons. I have recommendations based on the testing that we've done so far. And that's why you hear me say 6 to 8 for the full-size vessels. Only based on our testing, not because I've hit any hard cap or seen any other things. But that's an awesome question. So the objectives here. Now, open objectives, by the way, and you can see we've depreciated a lot of classic style. I won't even go into detail on that. But you can have timed objectives too. So in other words, once the objective is active, maybe it's a 5-minute window. As a result, if they don't complete the objective in 5 minutes, it's a failure. And if it's a primary, boom. So you can create those instances where, like, wait, the ship's about to hit the planet. We've only got 5 minutes. You can create objectives that actually tie specifically to time. These others, I'm really not going to go into detail on because these are also going to be depreciated over time because everything is essentially being moved to the open category. And so they'll be open and timed when we're all said and done. I'm leaving these in because we have modders that have already built missions. So technically you can still use the ones that you see here, but all of these are being depreciated for a specific reason. And that is because all of the conditional checks to say, did they do it or not? Is it available or not? Is the objective failed or not? is going to be driven through the event architecture. So, and again, I'll touch more on the event. I keep saying events and we haven't gotten to it, I know, but we'll get there. So objectives, comm channels. I don't have any comm channels in this mission. The only time you see a comm channel to date so far is if you want to pre-build a communication channel between the players and NPCs. A good example is in the Homestead Company mission. The communication soon-to-be operations officer has a Homestead Company comm channel that when they click on it, it has access to all of the Homestead craft. So they can message, it's basically a group. They can message that group and say, head to, Caus 4, and all of them will reply from that group. So you can create kind of like a group chat. So if your mission has something where you want to talk with a group of objects, you can do that, and you'll do it through tags. I haven't mentioned it, but almost everything in the architecture has the ability to be tagged. It could be a model, it could be a vessel class, it could be an object type, an object class, so on and so forth. So tags are everywhere. So if I put a tag on here to say, in my Homestead example, the Homestead NPCs are all tagged as Homestead. So if I put the Homestead tag in here, then what'll happen is it will automatically create a conversation at mission start between the players and any objects matching Homestead, just like that, as an example. Objects in the world, exactly what you think it is. So here we have a container near Earth. This is an additional container. And I will touch on this very quickly because we didn't cover maps tonight because that's obviously in progress. You can define objects in the world at large, on map definitions. A great example of this is Starbase Alpha, Space Dock, and some of the comm stations that are essentially in every mission are not defined in the missions. They're defined in the map. So in the map, you're not just defining star systems and planets. You can also say, there's a research station over here. There's this over by Mars. There's, Starbase Alpha at Earth. So that those objects are automatically inherited with any mission you play. So you don't have to add them every single time. So these objects are specific, again, to this mission. So we've got container A214. I'll pick that up here. If it has a faction, of course, that would apply here. Where is it? Location in space. This model uses where X is left to right, Y is up and down, and literally up and down, and Z is into the world. So that's your third dimension, Z going forward. So you can define where it is relative to planet Earth. And if it has a yaw, pitch, and roll orientation, you can define that as well. Predefined cargo. This one actually has fiber optics. This mission uses fiber optics. And then you can also select randomize and with a min and max. So this will automatically generate randomized cargo between 10 and 60 units every time the mission spawns. So you can do that, but you also can explicitly define a particular cargo. Okay. Hard points. This is not to define new hard points. This would be to change the details of a hard point on a vessel class. So if you want to, say, disable hard point, remove an object from a hard point, so on and so forth, you can do that from here. So if you have an NPC that has special conditions, something's broken, or you want to disable most of their components, you can do that right from here. Dialogue, in this case, you see it has the container dialogue that has its own groups. You can also define custom dialogue here. I'll actually hop over to a different object so you can see some of that. And then you can find tasks and properties. So I'm going to intentionally close that. And let's pick on Starbase Alpha here. Oh, wait, which one did I apologize. Oh, here we go. Huh, where am I trying to find? Sorry, guys. I was trying to find one that... I apologize. I thought I had a good one that had that in there, but that's all right. I thought I had a one that already had that predefined. My fault. You got the debris, the mining station, etc. Now notice this has tags. I'll show you why that's important here. And we're going to start diving into the event system here in just a second. But this tag will be important, mining station B. So again, there's that. So let's go. We've got objects. Here's events. Let's go ahead and let's dive right in. So these are the events that actually generate the details of how radical action works. It's not a lot of events, right? But it does some nice things. So starting out in space dock, this event, okay, has a certain number of conditions, and when these conditions are met, okay, it will then trigger in order the actions we see on the right-hand side. So the frequency of this event is single. That means it can only fire once, or recurring means it in theory, fire multiple times. Manual means it should never fire unless fired by another event, or the game master fires it manually. And you can actually even set an event to be game master accessible, where they can literally click a button that says starting out to trigger a particular, in this case, this event. So here we have conditions when the duration is 2 seconds from the start of this event. What that means is when the mission starts, if the event is by default active, this would be 2 seconds after the mission starts. And the controller of the player is space dock. It means, are they in physically space dock at the start of the mission? We know they are because their spawn point is space dock, right? So when these two are met, you'll be able to, the game engine will trigger this automatically without the game master having to do a thing. So we can go to actions. But before we do that, I'll just show you some examples of things you can check and do with conditions. You can check cargo, controller. And controller is like, am I docked? If I'm docked at a station, the station is technically controlling me because I'm docked. I can't go anywhere. So I have to request permission to depart, right? So the station is my controller as the player. That can be true for other objects in the world too. Now, devices, I haven't really touched on here, but devices are, if you have external physical hardware that you have attached to the game engine, DMX lights, Z-Wave controllers, MQTT devices, Raspberry Pis, etc., you can actually check device states externally to then act on that. So if somebody, say, pushes a physical button that you've got wired in a different room, the game engine can say, hey, they've pushed that button. So because they pushed that button, this condition is now true. Emergency is that is more literal for safety, fire safety, frankly. If this were installed in a location-based experience, like in a brick and mortar store, the emergency condition is for if the fire alarm is tripped, what have you, to ensure that you can then take action in the simulation to say, please exit the simulation, for safety reasons, what have you. That's just because we do have relationships with brick and mortars, we build in things like that just to make sure there's safety involved. Objective complete. Is it complete or not? How many objects of a certain type are in the world? Is an object property. So I can check the property of an individual object as a condition for this event. Meaning, did they turn their shields on? Did they take a certain amount of damage? So on and so forth. You can check all those little levels of detail when you're checking an object property. Percent complete. Now that's the percent complete of the mission objectives. So you can check and say, hey, I've got 10 objectives. They've completed 5 of them. So that's 50%, right? So I can say, if they've gotten more than 50% of the objectives complete, I can check against that, again, to trigger various actions. Did the player get hit in the shields? Did they get hit in the hull? Did they take catastrophic damage? So that's less than 20% hull integrity. These are mainly for effects, like lighting, sounds, that you want to do out in the world. And again, I will be jumping to the custom module to show you some of those examples. Proximity, how close is one object to another? So you can trigger based on if they're close enough or if they're far away. Did they enter a particular star system? Did they exit a particular star system? And same with planetary system. Score is really the score of the mission. The scoring system is in place. I haven't used it a lot. Players, modders so far haven't used it a lot, but you literally can score a mission. So based on how they're scoring, you can take actions. The mission state, is it running? Is it paused? Is it idle? So on and so forth. Did they succeed? So you can actually trigger certain things on if the mission succeeded, or if they failed for that matter. Success, yes or no. Duration, which we already kind of touched on. This one is duration, so it's the 2 seconds. Now, time remaining. Time remaining only applies if you've explicitly said the mission has a hard stop. So the mission may have a 30-minute timer, and that's the duration you saw on the first tab. But duration is the average duration, but you can also say that you can actually flag it to say this is a hard stop. It's not just suggested time. That could be good, again, for if you're doing convention experiences or brick and mortar where you want to kind of set a specific window. But you could then have triggers to say, hey, when time remaining is 5 minutes or less, play a message. Your time's almost up, whatever it is. And then you can check against a game variable. So you were asking that question earlier about the campaign system. So here I can say, well, hey, if that variable I set in mission 1 is such and such for when I'm in mission 2, then I can take certain actions. So you can do that right from here. So all of this is all the kind of stuff you can do just to check conditions to then take actions. So we haven't even gotten to the actions yet. And the only other important note with the events is that with the mode here, all or any, that means all of these conditions must be true to then trigger the following actions, versus any, which means as long as one of these conditions is true, it will trigger these actions. Okay, just like that, which is really nice. So that's that. Let's talk about actions now. On this one, I've got object visibility to reach Celiano 1 is set to true. So I'm actually making an objective that I have hidden from the players. I'm now making it true. So it's going to pop up on the comms officer's operations screen as a new mission objective. Okay, and then also deliver fiber optics, return to Earth. And then I'm adding a mission waypoint of Celiano 1 to the mission list. So then that's what pops up on the flight console. So I can just, again, without doing any coding, that's how easy it is for me to add a mission waypoint for the players. And then I'm sending a particular topic from Starbase Alpha, topic of delivery. So these are predefined topics on the objects in the world. So those topics, again, in that dialogue system that we touched on earlier, I'm saying send that topic over. Okay. And then I'm waiting 2 seconds, and then I'm sending the sidetrack topic. And if you'll know, if you've played Radical Action, it's where, hey, we need you to go drop off these fiber optics, and don't get sidetracked this time. So there's a kind of, it gives a little slight delay, so you get a little boom, in there for fun. So this is just one event, but let's go back in here and let's talk about all the things you can do with actions. You can adjust the time available. So that's, again, if you have rigid mission time, you can adjust that. You can trigger an external device. Remember how in the conditions we were checking the status of a device. So maybe it's a physical button, things like that. But in this case, I can trigger DMX lights. I can do other things. And again, we'll play with that in a little bit. DMX. We can enable an event that might currently be disabled. Why is that important? It allows you to have events that are disabled, so disabled events cannot trigger in the world. That's important. So you might have an event that you want to have dormant, and then at a certain point in the mission, when things have changed, the players have done something they should have done, or they did something they shouldn't have done. Either way, you can then enable a separate event to then start checking to automatically fire. This will prevent particular events from automatically firing incorrectly, or it might just be something, again, you want to wait till later on. You can check the status of an event. You can force the triggering on an event. So this is different from enable. This is just saying, fire this event. Just go ahead and do it. You can set the mission. That's literally changing the mission from mission A to mission B. You can, with an action, switch the mission in real time. You can end a mission, and that just ends it outright. So it doesn't actually end it with success or failure. It just ends it. Success will treat it, and it will end the mission, but as a success, or end the mission as a failure. You can send individual mission messages out to, now this is NPC messages from either an NPC to the player or NPC to NPC, because the NPCs do talk to each other. And then you can send messages to the console. So this is the game engine sending messages to the players. A good example would be sending a message to the flight console saying FTL is disabled because, so on and so forth. Or if they try to orbit, you cannot orbit as you are not close enough. It's sending in-game messages at a functional level to individual players. So it's not the messaging that a comms officer would do. Send topic, like we just touched on there, that's predefined topics on a dialogue tree. Steam achievements. So and there's not a lot of Steam achievements yet, but as the Steam achievements grow, this is actually how I even trigger them. They're actually built into the event architecture to be able to trigger them based on things that happen. This means that I can grow the Steam achievements and add them in organically without even having to change the Horizons EXE engine. This can just be added through missions. And then I can set object properties. I can spawn an object. I can despawn an object. That's different from destroy. Despawn just literally just disappears from the world. Blink, like, Thanos style. It's gone. Destroy will explode it. So just like it got hit and it exploded in the world, it will explode and cause damage based on the explosion, just like it would if you shot it down out of the sky. Script function, that is the scripting engine, which I'll touch on towards the end of the mission editor here as we get there. But this allows you to call custom C# functions that you have written that may do something well above and beyond anything that I have created in the event architecture. That's, again, available for the flexibility of the engine. I don't even hardly use this function, but I already know some players that have in the modding they've done. So, again, it's out there. Playing a sound. You can add or clear tags from objects. So you remember how I talked about how the tagging system is really important for how you interact with things. So like when we're setting the properties of an object, it can be by tag. So I could set the properties of 30 objects just based on their tag rather than just one object. But then I can add or clear tags as we go. I can set a task for an object. Tasks are NPCs. So, task, it might be patrol, it might be investigate, repair. Basically, what is their role? What are they trying to accomplish? Completing objective completion, objective visibility, and we saw those earlier. And that's what we're doing on this one. Adding a mission waypoint, adding a local waypoint, adding an interstellar waypoint. So those are more for, that's not a mission waypoint. That's adding a waypoint to an actual object. So like I'll just pick on this here and you'll see it pop up. So I'll put in a tag of the object. Again, we talked about tags. Reach the element and then target, so on and so forth. So I can actually add waypoints to NPCs. So I can tell an NPC, okay, all you guys with the tag Dashi1 go over here. Or all you guys with Dashi2 go over there. So let's actually back out of this event and let's go pick on right here, Dashi Squadron 1. So this event, Dashi Squadron 1, spawns a dagger with the tag DA1 near Mining Station B. Remember, we had that tag on that other vessel, right? Just like that. And then task of DA1. So all objects with a tag of DA1, which is everything we just spawned, task attack Mining Station B. So you can get that fine-tuned with what they're doing. Just like that. Now, notice this doesn't have any conditions, and it's not a Game Master event, so how did this happen? Well, let's do that now. We'll hop back up here to deliver cargo. So once the mining station, which is a different tag, has 25 or more fiber optics. So I'm basically telling you all the guts of how Radical Action works, which is fine. But you're seeing all the details right here. Is mark the objective, deliver fiber optics complete. Mining station delivery, wait 16 seconds. So they've completed that task. And then the mining station B is like, hey, I'm being attacked, help, help, help. And that waits 10 seconds. And the Starbase Alpha sends, hey, assist at Saliana 2. Adds a mission waypoint. And then look at this. Trigger Dashi Squadron 1, wait 20 seconds. And that triggers Dashi Squadron 2. So this event trigger right there. So these are actually basically being triggered by other events, hence up there. And notice what happens when I reach Interplanetary System Saliana 2. We do all these other things, including triggering Dashi Squadron 3, just like that. And by the way, there is a quiz later on all these details I'm giving, so be ready. Have your pencils, down with your Scantron sheets. And if you know what Scantron is, you're old. There we have it. And then victory conditions. When all the Dashi objects have been destroyed, so object count of tag DA1 is 0 for all 3. Good work. Wait 10 seconds. Complete. Mission end. Boom. They did it. Just like that. That's how it works, people. And again, all done in the event architecture. And not that many events, if you noticed. But that entire mission is scripted right here in this. I'll very briefly touch on this. Variables. Now, there aren't any variables in this mission, but this is where you would actually define, test variable value 1. So I can then, using the event system, change this variable from time to time and act on it in the mission as we go. I'm going to get rid of that because I don't want that in there. You can also have predefined mission waypoints. So like when you start off, you have Earth available to you right here. So this is in Long Patrol, the classic starter mission. You start with your mission list, really. You start with going to the first comm station, then to Betelgeuse, then to Mars, etc., and going through all of that. And that's all defined here. Scripting, this is C#. There's nothing in this because, again, I'm hardly using it myself, so I won't go into extreme detail. But I do want to take a minute I'm going to hop back. And if you got questions, jump in with them. I'm going to hop back to the module, and I'm going to go back one more to here because I'm going to pick on custom. So here we are in the custom module. Well, why did I hop into this one? There's not a lot in here, but there is some things I wanted to point out. Every one of you that plays Starship Horizons has a custom module. And guess what? In that custom module, which you can edit, has these 6 standard events. So you can actually change these on your own to do different things. The primary reason these exist is for those of you at home that have DMX lighting and other things that want to be able to have lighting events take place based on the conditions. These are already kind of pre-baked in there for you. But notice they're not part of the Horizons module. Well, why is that? That's so that any changes you make here are yours. They don't affect the Horizons module and vice versa. But this allows you to change them so that they work for you and it's consistent. It'll never change. So like, for example, blue alert. When player alert equals 1, we're going to do a DMX event to set to blue for 100 milliseconds. Green, set to green, so on and so forth. Yellow alert. And then notice this, by the way. Play the siren and red alert for it, just like that. Shield hit. Hull hit, just like that. Tried to, again, put as much in the event architecture as we could to be able to kind of take advantage of that. So, all right. Well, believe it or not, let's see, how are we doing here? A little over an hour, not too bad. That is that's a great overview of the designer. I went into some detail in some areas, but do expect further deep dives on various areas and sections in the future. Specific sessions on mission design or event system, even far more detail than we got into tonight. And so great having everybody here. If there's any final questions in the Q&A section, I'm welcome to have a few thrown at me if you've got questions. After we kind of go through those, we'll call it a night, everyone. Anybody have anything they'd like to ask? And I'm just checking in the Twitch chat, by the way. And again, hopefully everybody's ready for the quiz that'll be tomorrow. Should have been taking notes. Not directly rated, but can we intercept comms? So type and message. Great question. Today's version, the version that's out there right now, the answer is no. However, the answer is yes, coming extremely soon. Release 20, which is coming out this week, will not have that. But the releases you'll see this year, so 2020, over the next 6 weeks, we'll see massive Game Master updates, a lot of which I covered Not necessarily every single one, but a lot of which I covered in last week's stream. But one of those is absolutely intercepting comms in real time. And not only just intercepting comms, but being able to pick and choose. So doing it at large, or saying, I just want to intercept comms for this one NPC, the rest they can just go on about their business. And you'll be able to reply with either the standard boilerplate messages, like what the NPC would have said, or you can type in your own manual message if you wish, as well. So you'll be able to do either or. And again, that's coming very, very soon. Like I said, we're literally the middle of November now, and I've got 6 weeks left. No pressure. But the Game Master tools are like a big focus for me right now. I've already got some updates that are going to be in release 20, but releases 21 and 22, which will certainly be this year, as I've been doing a release, some weekly, but some every couple of weeks will happen then. There's some other stuff up my sleeve with the Game Master tools that I didn't talk about last week's stream that you'll see coming as well, which I'm kind of excited about. So throwing that away. Anything else, gang? I should cue the oh man, I just I got a little choked up. I was going to say I should cue the Jeopardy music, but then rest in peace, Alex Trebek. You were an amazing guy. Nothing else? All right. Well, I'll give it a few more seconds. I don't want to leave. Oh, wait. It's 20 minutes past midnight. Cheerio, indeed. Have a great evening, or morning in your case. And I think we'll leave it with that, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for attending. Have a great night and or morning, wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you next week. Cheerio.